A guy who loves to talk fantasy baseball.
3-2.
This is Full Count Fantasy Baseball.
In a year that has been so improbable, the impossible has happened.
Here is your improbable host, Dean Millard.
Presented by Ultimate Franchise Fantasy Sports. Get in the game where you own the game.
Hey there, and welcome to another episode of Full Count Fantasy Baseball. One of the most exciting times right now in sports is the push for the playoffs. When you have wild card spots in any sport, that push to the playoffs, that final stretch drive is amazing. And September is it for Major League Baseball playoffs. They start in early October. The World Series will start October 26th. So if you're a baseball fan, and even if you're just a fan of drama, every sport likes to claim that their playoffs is the best, and there's great things about them. I'm a sucker for nostalgia, and the sound of the crowd in the fall at a baseball playoff game sounds different to me than anything else. I love the first round of the NFL playoffs. Or the NHL playoffs, rather. I love the first week of the NFL season. So there are things to love about every sport, and we explore the things that we love, and I love particularly here about baseball. This show is presented by Ultimate Franchise Fantasy Sports. We're going to tell you all about them and the great things that we have going with baseball, football, hockey, basketball, golf soon to come, combat sports. Fantasy sports on the blockchain, folks. It is the next big thing. The future of fantasy is UFFS, and the future is now. We're also broadcast proudly on the Ultimate Fantasy Sports Network, UFSN. We want to be your one-stop shop for fantasy sports, and we'll tell you all about the great shows and programming and plans that we have as we go along. But I always like to start the show off with a simple question, and I always try to tie it on Thursdays, especially when we do this show, with the early game. So let's take a look at the schedule.
This is a serious message. Peace and love. Peace and love.
So a couple early games, the Phillies and Nationals and the A's and the Tigers. So the question I'm asking is, between the Phillies and the A's, who has a better chance of catching the Braves or the Astros, respectively, in their division? Between the Phillies and A's, who would you pick to catch the team ahead of them in their division? So the NL East for the Phillies, they have to catch Atlanta, who just got swept by the Dodgers. And the Astros are leading the AL West, and that's where Oakland, who just played very, very well against the New York Yankees, could try to catch the Astros. So that's the question I'm asking you. I would love for you to chime in on anything you hear about or see on this program, and we will give you the contact information very shortly. But I'll just tell you that the A's are now 5 games back. They lost their last one. They're 5 games back against Houston. The Phillies obviously have a better chance. They're 2 games back because the Atlanta Braves, as mentioned, have lost 3 in a row. The Phillies have won 5 in a row. And then there's those New York Mets who just can't seem to get anything right, whether it comes to rats or how they treat their fans. And, you know, some of their fans might be looking at them and thinking about that sort of animal. But anyway, that's for another day and another discussion. But I don't think I've ever seen that before. I don't think I've ever seen a team boo its fan base. I mean, you know, I love the group of guys and gals that we have going on in this fantasy platform on UFFS. And, you know, the guys that are from New York are be like, yeah, that's just Mets. That's just the Mets. Like, you know, so it's amazing what can happen when you get caught up in emotion when you're getting booed. I mean, Javi Baez is realizing this is not lovable loser land of Wrigley Field anymore. This is New York. So crazy stuff going on in Major League Baseball. All right, big thanks to our title sponsor, Ultimate Franchise Fantasy Sports, the most realistic, high-stakes fantasy platform out there, the only fantasy platform on the blockchain. Whatever sport UFFS builds, mimics nearly everything about the league it is based on, and we will have Ultimate Fantasy League Baseball It'll be the next best thing to owning a Major League Baseball team. Auctions November 5th to 7th. We've got the rule book very close. I'll tell you about some things in a second, but you're going to love it. Head to uffsports.com where you can find all the info. And if you head to the news section, you'll find out and get to learn a little bit about the man who's in charge of scouting. And we'll tell you all about that as we move along in the show. It's so full of surprises, all these teases. But we'll get to headlines. How do you spell relief? A baseball Thunderdome where we pit two players together. This year it's two young starters based on this season only. Waiver wire wins, self-explanatory. Who should you be picking up? And Prospect Peak is where we'll take a look at the future and some players to look at, good and bad. Guys that are on their way up and some guys that have stalled out and some guys that have actually fallen out of the top 100 MLB pipeline. And we'll also try to help you rule your league. And that's where we'll give you ideas on how to design rules or structures for your league of not just ones that I've been in, but to ones that other people have told me about that I've really liked. One thing I really like, depending on your league, is a no-hitter bonus. That's kind of something that's cool. It doesn't work for everything. This year there would have been 7 no-hitter bonuses. I think it's 7. Maybe it's like 17 by now. Who knows? You blink and there's been a no-hitter this year. But that's what we'll do with Rule Your League. We'll also maybe from time to time give you kind of like a fantasy rule to live by, so to speak, as far as things you should and shouldn't be doing. I don't think that you should ever have hard and fast rules of I'll never draft this type of player or this player from this country or etc. But I think you should have guidelines, rules, whatever you want to call them. But be flexible with them if you can be. All right, this is how you can get in touch with us.
You talking to me? You talking to me? You talking to me? Then who the hell else are you talking? You talking to me? Well, I'm the only one here.
All right, these are the ways that you can reach myself and the various different platforms with UFFS as well. I'm at Duck Millard on Twitter, and if you're interested in getting into the Ultimate Fantasy League Baseball, whether that's an owner or a scout, it's UFLB_UFF Sports on Twitter. UFLB_UFF Sports on Twitter. You can email us here at the show, fullcountfantasybaseball@gmail.com. UFSN@UFFsports.com is how you get in touch if you're interested in getting a program on the network. And fullcountfantasybaseball.ca as well as UFFsports.com are the main websites for this show. And, of course, the entire platform that is blowing up. Football, the draft has happened, future auctions, the season is about to start. I'm so excited for Andy, Max, and Jamie within the football group, and Alex has baseball humming. And you know, football, just because that season starts, don't get too comfortable because they'll have Legends Leagues. Man, there's so much coming down the pipe when it comes to UFFS. But let's get on to some baseball headlines, shall we? That's what we're talking about. And it's roster expansion time right now in Major League Baseball. And this is a chance to watch your fantasy prospects in action as teams are now allowed to add 2 extra players. Some young pitchers will join the rotation as spot fillers. Others will head to the bullpen. And so at some point, you know, a batter, a call-up, or a pitcher is going to go on a wild tear. He'll be proclaimed the next best thing. Another guy will struggle and be prematurely called a bust. So what I would recommend is don't get too caught up in the hype. Take the data, do with it what you will, but don't get too caught up in a month of Major League Baseball where it could be the best or the worst time for a player in their whole career. What I would also do is make sure you're not just watching your team. You know, if you're serious about fantasy, you should also know about your opponent's rosters, whether that's within your division, depending on your league, and things like that. Know what your opponents might be looking for, or that you might be looking for as well. So this is a really important time if you're very serious about fantasy sports and fantasy baseball to be collecting data. Now, could be hard with if you're a playoff team, but if you're a non-playoff team, or once you get into the UFLB, you'll have a staff that you can assign somebody to be like, okay, you are on prospect duty down the stretch. Find the guy we're going after, so to speak. So just something to look for. And it also means that some of these guys are going to be waiver pickups as well that maybe weren't, and you can find some guys down the stretch for the teams that are in a playoff mode right now. Maybe there's a guy you can call up that's going to go out there and you stream him for a game and he just throws a gem. You just never know. Obviously, with streaming, the opposite can happen and a guy can get blown up. Speaking of blowing up in the Bay Area, this is happening. Starling Marte was dealt to the Oakland A's. They had a one-game lead in the wild card. Now, they're outside on the outside right now, barely, but that's not Marte's fault, as all he has done is produce, and mostly in the stolen bases category. Check this out, 20 steals in 28 games. And the most since the deal, so that was I think on July 1st, and he's fourth most all season in the American League. Remember, he's only played 28 games in the American League. He's already fourth. He's also still third in the NL with 22 steals, meaning he's the first guy in Major League Baseball history to have 20-plus steals in both leagues in the same season. And, here's another nugget you're loving. If caught stealing is a negative in your league, which it should be, you shouldn't all just be getting rewarded for everything. Players should be punished for things they do wrong. Errors, caught stealing, striking out. So anyway, back to the caught stealing. He has yet to be thrown out. So you're getting no negatives. You're getting all these positives. Oakland went from 16th. That's as an Oakland A. In 20 attempts. He's 20 for 20. Oakland went from 16th in the league to 5th when it comes to swiping bags. And it's very, very exciting. But I will say this. Let's pump the brakes a lot on any kind of Ricky Henderson comparisons, okay? I've seen some tweets out there that are talking, and I can understand if you're saying, like, this is the most exciting guy since Ricky Henderson. Okay, I would give you that. Or this is the most exciting Oakland A base stealing story since Ricky Henderson. That's understandable. But let's pump the brakes a little bit. I've seen some comparisons to Ricky Henderson out there.
Child, please.
We cannot do that. We have to keep our heads about this. But it's a great story. It is definitely a terrific story. All right, how about Ahmad Rosario? Red hot in the second half. When the Mets in Cleveland made the big deal for Francisco Lindor, this guy was looked in almost as a throw-in. And in the first half of this season, that didn't dispute that opinion. He wasn't great. However, so far in the second half, there is not a fantasy GM that would take Lindor this year over Rosario. How about going 5 for 5 with 11 total bases, 2 home runs, and 5 RBIs that wrapped up in August? That was in one game. That saw him hit .372 in August in 113 at-bats, 4 long balls, 20 RBIs, and an OPS over 980. Or you could have Lindor and the thumbs down Mets who make up rat stories and more. I mean, this is amazing. This guy is so exciting. And, there is an opportunity, I'm not saying for sure, but there's dual position with this guy. So there's a lot of value. Whereas Lindor, I was so happy to trade Lindor. And, Lindor might be able to turn around, but I was watching Chris Russo speak the other day on the MLB Network, and he's talking about Lindor never wanting to be there and was kind of just took this deal, giant deal, begrudgingly. And, Chris, according to the people that are way more in the know than me, there's some serious issues. Obviously, you can see the serious issues going on within, that ecosystem there, but you're paying this guy a lot of money. You traded away this other guy who is just rocking it up right now. And sure, it's just a second half. Let's, we still have to be careful about, seeing this over a full season. But when you look at the two players, I had one in Lindor and I have Rosario, and I'm happy about it right now in that way. All right, Cody Bellinger is baffling fantasy GMs right now and Dodger fans, and probably Dave Roberts. And you know, I'm a Dodger fan. I also have Bellinger in fantasy, and you know, the Dodgers have finally climbed to the top of the NL West, overtaking the Giants for the first time since April, and it hasn't been with a lot of help from the former MVP. 5 for 43 in the last 2 weeks, an OPS of just 230, 3 home runs and no home runs. He didn't start the series finale last night against the Braves. He has just 1 multi-hit game in his last 20. If you didn't sell low and you're hoping for a bounce back, you know, I'd love to see it, but I'm not getting too excited about this weekend against the Giants. He's hitting .050 against the Dodgers' biggest rival this season. He does have a solo home run, but has struck out 17 times in 11 games against the Giants this year. So it's going to be an exciting series this weekend. I would love to see Cody Bellinger bounce back. I'm just not holding my breath. I think at some point he will, but you know, most fantasy leagues are in playoff mode right now. And you know, when you get to the playoffs, you need your guys to really come through. Now, in the UFLB, you would have time for Bellinger to get his groove on in the playoffs if you were a playoff team, because we go right to the postseason. And we do a lot of scouting, which brings you to our final headline. Meet Brian Hernandez, UFLB Director of Scouting. And really excited to start unveiling the team that we have working on the Ultimate Fantasy League Baseball. We have a lot of hardworking guys, and we have a lot of great ideas. And you can find out more by heading to uffsports.com, heading to the news section, and there it is. The press release detailing Brian, his background, and what he's looking forward to doing within scouting. So check it out at uffsports.com, and you can read all about the new Director of Scouting. We have a great staff, some former pro players that know the game. We spent a lot of time yesterday, Matt Soren and I, the Director of Competition, making sure that this rule book, the scoring system is right. The rule book is very close to being finished. It'll be formatted, and then we will be releasing it. We'll be putting together an owner's package as well for potential owners that want to get into this league that explains it. Because I will tell you, it is different than any other fantasy league. It is the most realistic. You do have to know your stuff. It is 30 teams, so you're not going to be able to have 5 Cy Young starters on your rotation unless you neglect the rest of your actual rosters. So anyway, check it out. Read all about it. Brian Hernandez is the Director of Scouting for UFLB, and we're really excited to be moving forward with that. Franchise auctions, November 5th to 7th. More details to come. All right, how do you spell relief? This is where we talk about the closers in the game, and this week I'm looking at the most saves by CBC, closer by committee, in the last month. So if you're looking, if you do not have a bona fide guy and you're looking for a closer by committee, or maybe you have a couple of these guys, these are the amount of teams that are using closer by committee right now that I could calculate. And you've got the Reds, Tigers, Marlins, Mariners, and Giants. And some of these teams are doing it because they have to, and some of the teams are doing it by choice. But injuries dictate things for some teams. But they all have 7 in the last month. And then you're looking at the Rays with 4, and the Pirates and the Cubs with 3. So if you do have a closer by committee, or you do want to go to that, because sometimes your closer by committee is, if you have a guy that is a closer by committee, maybe he picks up a hold if you have holds in your league, which I highly recommend. I wouldn't make holds the same value as a save by any means. But I would have them in because it gives more opportunity to use more players in your league and bring in more players. And I think that should always be the goal. I mean, in the UFAFL, there's offensive linemen. No fantasy league is doing anything like that. So I would highly recommend holds. And then that's where you can look at closer by committee candidates, because, one night your guy might not get the save, but he could be there and end up getting the hold instead, of getting the sorry, I've been distracted by this. The music had started in the background. So basically what I'm saying is closer by committees bring in more opportunities for categories, especially when you are looking at guys that have extra value when it comes to holds. All right, we're going to get into Baseball Thunderdome, some super starters and waiver wire wins, not just who to pick up, but the most picked up and most dropped in the last little while. This is Full Count Fantasy Baseball.
This is Full Count Fantasy Baseball.
You lollygag the ball around the infield.
Presented by Ultimate Franchise Fantasy Sports.
You lollygag your way down to first.
Get in the game where you own the game.
You lollygag in and out of the dugout. Do you know what that makes you, Larry?
Lollygaggers.
Lollygaggers.
Lollygaggers. Full Count Fantasy Baseball is part and proud to be part of the Ultimate Fantasy Sports Network, your one-stop fantasy sports shop. We are building something all fantasy sports fans will love, and we're looking for quality programming to join us. We have great shows about our leagues, and we'd love for you to join us and talk fantasy sports in general. Reach out if you're interested in being a part of the rotation, whether you have a daily, weekly, or even monthly show. If it's about fantasy sports, we would love to chat with you. Head over on Twitter to UFS Network, or you can email ufsn@uffsports.com on more information how you can own the game with the show. That's what we do. We want to own the game with everything it is we do. All right, let's get into it now. Baseball Thunderdome.
Welcome to another edition of Thunderdome!
You be cocky and arrogant, even when you're getting beat.
2 men enter, 1 man leaves.
Prediction? Yes, prediction.
And right now, I've got 2 men.
It's serious.
It is indeed on Baseball Thunderdome because we want you to pick between 2 players. So here's the stipulations for today. You're basing it only on this season so far, not what they have done in the past as far as making all-star teams, not how many years they have been productive, just this season. Baseball Thunderdome, who you got between these 2 guys? Walker Bueller of the LA Dodgers and Corbin Burnes of the Milwaukee Brewers. Like, Burnes wins the hair game. That's a no-brainer. I'm sorry if anybody is disappointed in that, but Burnes is winning the hair game. But let's take a look at the numbers from just this year. And as far as starts, Burnes has 23 starts. He's pitched just under 140 innings. He's given up 35 earned runs, only 5 home runs, which is a big one, and he's walked only 26 batters. He's also struck out, where did the strikeouts go? 189 batters, so just under 189. And he has some good numbers. A whip of .935 and an ERA of 2.27. You look at Walker Bueller this year, and he's got an ERA of 2.05. That leads the league in 27 starts. 176 innings. He's given up 40 earned runs and 16 home runs. So that's a big difference between Bueller and Burnes. He's walked 44. He struck out 183, so that's fairly equivalent. And a whip of .915. So some of the numbers are fairly close. Some of them Bueller is a little bit better, and some of them Burnes is a lot better. So interesting to hear your thoughts. As mentioned, hit me up on Twitter at Duck Millard. Would love to hear from you. Listen, I've got a Dodger jersey right behind me. I think it's pretty clear who I would take. I watch a lot of Dodger games, but I also, in that way, do watch the Brewers when they play them, or I like to watch the Brewers when the Dodgers aren't playing, and so I've been able to watch Burnes. Just this year, I'm a Dodger guy, but I would not scoff at anybody making a case for Corbin Burnes. It might be hard for me because I bleed Dodger blue, but That's the way I'm going with Baseball Thunderdome. I would pick Walker Bueller, but I wouldn't laugh or think it was odd if somebody decided that, you know what, I am going to take Corbin Burns. So anyway, you can do that if you like, because I think it's a good choice. I have a hard time picking against any Dodger. As for waiver wire wins, going with Scott Barlow, who is a reliever with the Kansas City Royals. And, you know, he isn't a guy who has been dominating all year as a Kansas City Royal closer, but he is a guy who looks like he is taking over that role. 4 saves in the last 5 chances in the last 2 weeks, 6 strikeouts, and just 1 earned run. That's pretty impressive. That is very, very impressive when you're looking at a guy who's coming in and hasn't done that role very often. Now, he's only on 43% of the rosters on Yahoo, so people haven't really caught on just yet how well this is going, and only 41% of rosters on CBS. Overall, this guy has some really good numbers. His strikeouts are very strong. 77 Ks in 66 and a third innings. I think that's pretty good. And I'm not sure if this is a guy that Kansas City is looking at. There we go. Sorry, I couldn't bring the graphic up. I don't know if this is a guy that Kansas City is looking at long-term as their closer. But right now he is. And that's what you might need to win your fantasy league right now. You know, some of our leagues, you can pick up a guy on waivers, but then you lose him after the season. That's okay. If Scott Barlow turns out to be the next Mariano Rivera, then too bad, you missed out. But if he helps you win this league, then that's all you need. And then you have a guy to target next year. A guy that gets you consistent saves and Ks without blowing up. And that's important. This guy is not blown up. He's only given up more than a run twice this season, and it happened in back-to-back games in July. Every other appearance has either been 0.0 earned run average, the Blutowski, or just 1 earned run. And every once in a while, your reliever is going to give up a run. They're going to give up hits. Their ERA and their whip is going to go up. But this guy has not done it in a bad way, in a blow-up way. Like, he has not gone the way of Brad Hand. Like, Brad Hand, he might as well be called Swollen Hand for the amount his ERA has ballooned since he went to the Blue Jays. And, you know, I know he's not with the team right now, and so we're thinking of Brad, but looking at Brad on the field has not been good. That's not what you want in a reliever. And I'm not saying Scott Barlow is going to turn out to be much better than Brad Hand. Brad Hand, obviously, dealing with some things right now as a Blue Jay and getting used to a new team. Hell, it's taken George Springer almost all season to get used to the Blue Jays, and he can't even stay healthy. So it takes a while, but this is a guy who could help you. As for the most added, you're looking at guys like Patrick Wisdom from the Cubs and Jed Lowry, infielder from the Oakland A's, and Kyle Farmer and Vlad Gutierrez from the Reds, both the most dropped in the last little while when it comes to fantasy baseball. So that's kind of interesting. I did pick up Vlad Gutierrez. He was a guy that I did recommend picking up, but then, later on realized that it was just a bit of a heater. And hey, Matt, that might be the same thing with Scott Barlow. His heater could be over, but I think it's worth taking a chance in a league that you need some depth going into the playoffs in a fantasy league. So that's where we're going with waiver wire wins. We will be back with Prospect Peak and Rule Your League right after this.
This is Full Count Fantasy Baseball.
All right, you guys, let's listen up. We won a game yesterday. We win one today, that's 2 in a row.
Presented by Ultimate Franchise Fantasy Sports.
We win one tomorrow, that's called a winning streak. It has happened before.
Get in the game, where you own the game.
So let's see some hustle. Let's jack it up a little. I got a feeling things are about to turn around for us.
Love Lou Brown from Major League. All right, Full Count Fantasy Baseball is presented by Ultimate Franchise Fantasy Sport. You name the sport, we're trying to build that league. If you want more information, the website is www.uffsports.com. You can get into various sports. Right now we have hockey. It's launched for 2 seasons. Football is launching next weekend in its first season. Basketball auctions in September, and of course baseball. That's what we're talking about. We've got franchise auctions in November, and we are going to be so realistic, talking 26-man rosters, 40-man lists. We'll have a scouting program. Remember before we introduced Brian Hernandez, our director of scouting? That's why we need a director of scouting, because we have a massive scouting platform where scouts get real-world players, they find them, they scout them, they list them, or they bid on them in auctions, and then when those players are drafted or become major league players, those scouts then reap the profits or sell them directly, the profits from auctions, or sell them directly. So we have so much going on. We're going to have a playoff system just like Major League Baseball. So if you're a wild card team in the UFLB, you are going to have to take the players from the playoff draft that we're going to have, which we will have, and you're going to have to load up on those wild card players, because you need to get through that wild card game to keep going on. So there's so much strategy that's going to go into this. The rule book will be available very, very soon. We are just going through the final stages of that. And it'll be available along with an owner's package. So check out www.uffsports.com. Head to the news section and learn about our new director, or not new, but learn some more stuff about our director of scouting, and we'll have more press releases every Thursday leading up to the franchise auctions and discuss them right here on what will become a new show profiling the Ultimate Fantasy League Baseball. All right, let's get to Prospect Peak right now. I'm going with Nate Pearson of the Blue Jays. Yeah, let's represent here north of the 49th. This is a guy who will hopefully eventually be a starter. In AAA this year, after a rough start in Major League Baseball, he had went for just over 30 innings, 30 and 2/3 innings. His K to walk ratio is not bad, 44-13. Not great, but the walk or the ERA is pretty high, and the WHIP is 1.10. And so this is a guy who was working his way back from some injuries. I'd imagine the confidence takes a bit of a hit when you suffer a few injuries and you start questioning things. But the good news is he's back with a big club. Now, he's in the bullpen. He's not in the rotation. But if something happens, they might be able to throw him into the rotation if things are going well. Or maybe he gets a bullpen start where he's the opener, so to speak. I think, obviously, injuries have held him back, but I think he eventually will get to the rotation. So I think the Jays are actually being smart with him. I kind of like it. They let him wet his beak, pardon the pun, a little, gain his confidence back, get ready to challenge for the rotation next year. And if there's something that comes up where you need a spot starter or something like that, if he's been pitching well as a reliever and you think he can go a couple innings, maybe you throw him in there as sort of an opener sort of thing, or a guy who takes over in the second or third inning from the opener. So I know there's a lot of people that are worried and concerned, and I think that's valid to be concerned about where Nate Pearson is, but I still think we'll give it a little bit of time. I mean, look at Kevin Gausman right now with the Giants. That is a guy who was highly touted, and people gave up on him, and he moved around, and now he's lighting it up with the team that was in first place. So I'd still be a little bit more patient with Nate Pearson, and I'd look at this. He's not in the rotation. Sure, that's too bad, but at least he's getting major league experience with the Blue Jays.
Smokey, this is not Nam. This is bowling. There are rules.
I don't think it taints it.
What you talking about, mister?
You're crazy. I like you, but you're crazy.
All right, when it comes to Rule Your League, as mentioned in the intro, I want to give you things that could make your league better. Possibly, not everything, but just suggestions from different leagues I've been in the past, or ideas I've talked to with different people, or sometimes just kind of like guidelines to go by when it comes to fantasy sports and fantasy baseball in particular. So the rule I would not implement is any rule that limits trades. So we have in one of our baseball leagues expiring contracts, and there was a rule that you couldn't trade expiring contracts because guys wanted them to go back into the draft. I get that. So we made a compromise. You could trade one expiring contract a year, so that at least teams weren't losing a guy for nothing. If they maybe wanted to hold on to him to make a run for a playoff spot, you shouldn't be punished by losing a guy. You should almost get that reward of like, okay, I made a run, it didn't work out, but now I'm going to trade this guy for an extra pick or something like that and get something. I understand wanting to make sure there's good players available in the draft. So I think some sort of compromise where you're allowed to trade a certain amount of players, but not limit. Again, the hard and fast rules of not being able to do something, I just don't think work. I think there has to be some meat in the middle flexibility. So maybe a compromise where you can trade a certain amount of players, but I don't think you should be able to trade all of them either, possibly, because you want players going back into that draft for leagues that do the redraft every year. Reminder, the UFLB will only have one draft ever. It'll be a 25-player draft because each team that you're bidding on in the franchise auctions will have a star player attached to it. So after that, we'll have a 25-player draft where you'll fill off your rest of your 26-man roster. And then from there, you will fill out your 40-man roster simply using scouts. Buying players from scouts. That's what you'll end up doing. All right, let's get to weekend watch right now, and I'll try to bring up Friday's games for this one. And it's no secret, I don't think anybody should be surprised what I will be watching when it comes to this weekend, and that is this game down at the bottom row in the center. I will be watching the Dodgers and the Giants all weekend long. I can't wait for it. Looking forward to this one. The Dodgers, I'll sneak a little A's and J's in there as well. That'll have AL wildcard implications. I'm starting to be more of an A's fan as well. But now the Dodgers, after winning last night and sweeping the Braves, they are now in first place in the NL West for the first time since April. And maybe they'll remain there. I would much rather, I have full confidence in the LA Dodgers that they can win the wild card and then go. But you just give yourself a better chance when you have a series rather than a wild card game. So hopefully the Dodgers, for my sake, for Brian Hernandez's sake, he's a big Dodger fan, they stay in first place. And then I would love to see a Giants-Dodgers playoff series. I don't want to see a one game. I want to see a playoff series between the Dodgers and the Giants. And if you want to learn more about UFF sports, head over to Ultimate Franchise Fantasy Sports Headquarters, www.uffsports.com. Full Count Fantasy Baseball is part of the Ultimate Fantasy Sports Network, UFSN, which is part of UFFS. You can follow along at UFSN on Twitter and find them on YouTube. And if you have a fantasy show, hit them up and join the fun. So at uffsports.com, you can join up as a fan. You can register as a scout and start scouting real-world players. You could try to buy a franchise as well. There's a lot of options to be had on this platform. And, of course, we have a variety of shows at UFSN, including an overview of what it is to be an NFT, an overview of what UFF sports is all about. So if you've been concerned, but you're not exactly sure, now is the time. Check that out on our UFSN channel, and you can find out more. All right, one more thing to say, and this comes from Crash Davis.
You be cocky and arrogant, even when you're getting beat.
That kind of sounds like his character John Dutton from Yellowstone as well. But that is it for the show. Thank you so much for joining me. We will have more news about the UFLB as we roll towards the franchise auctions in November. We will unveil more of our staff and the people that will be around to help run what is going to be an awesome awesome league. One more thing to say. Ban the shift. Get rid of it. Have yourselves a wonderful weekend, everybody. Go Dodgers.